Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Helen Lewitan, and I am a clinical psychologist and head of mental health and impact at the Flourish Journey. I am so excited to have with me tonight Chelsey Goodan, all the way from America. Chelsey is an author, an international speaker, and gender justice advocate. And I can't believe you're here next to me. We've spent so much time online. It's so nice to have you on the same couch. Before we jump into things, I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our main sponsor, Mecca, and the Mecca Empower team. A lot of you will be familiar with Mecca's huge retail stores across Australia and New Zealand, but something that we're so proud of in our partnership is the way they strive to embolden women and anyone that is a part of their shops and stores to really be their best through beauty. And I think between Mecca, the Flourish Journey, and Chelsey's values, it's this beautiful relationship that we're so excited to put on tonight. So without any further ado, I am just nervous about time because I feel like Chelsey and I get talking and time disappears. So Chelsey, tell us what brought you to publish your book and how you came about empowering parents and teenagers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here in Australia. I have been touring all around the U.S. For my book, Underestimated: The Wisdom and Power of Teenage Girls. And I just came from China where we had the book released there. And then I came to Australia. And so writing this book has been inspired by 16 years of working with teenage girls. I was invited into a rare space of trust, first as an academic tutor a long time ago, and then forming long-term relationships as a mentor. I mentored for girls from underserved communities. I became mentorship director of a nonprofit. And what happened was that one-on-one time that I spent with the girls, with them telling me their innermost thoughts and concerns and struggles. And then I realized that I was a really good translator to advocate for them out to the adult world, and that they trusted me to reach their parents, their teachers, the different adults in their life, to really listen and hear what they're struggling with and how we can better connect with them, better understand them, better anything like a parent is like, I hope tonight we're going to learn more about that. That's what we're going to do, right? And so one of the biggest issues that happened is parents like to kind of judge teenage girls as potentially emotional, dramatic, crazy, right? When you hear you're having a baby girl, it's like, oh, you're in for it. Just wait, until she's a teenager. And what happened is teenage girls hear people saying that and they're like, oh, cool. So I'm just terrible, right? Like, it's just totally fine to judge me and say I'm terrible. And that has not been my experience at all. Actually, these girls are so wise, and I quote them directly throughout my book and throughout the work that I do in speaking and workshops, because I want people to understand that they have something to say and it's powerful, and when we listen to them, that's when more connection and understanding happens.
I love it. I think a lot of the time at Flourish Journey, we hear girls open up in workshops and share things that they haven't shared before. And we think a lot about like what can be done at home. And, parents, it's such a tough gig. I'm a parent myself. And wearing those hats of, wanting to hold space and also really caring and wanting to protect and be there for your kids. It's like there's so many things going on. But obviously you have that experience, and something I'd love you to talk about and perhaps give some advice on is how do you hold space for young girls without making them feel judged, and just have that honest, open, non-judgmental space.
And that is the number one thing teenagers tell me, is that they feel judged. They do not feel like they can be fully authentically themselves because they can't get it right. And especially girls, they can't do anything right. They're too this or not enough of that. And there's just that messaging of you're never enough, because parents, they come from a well-meaning place of wanting to teach them or guide them, but oftentimes that feels like criticism, that they're not doing something well enough. And so I really, talk about it in the book, the step-by-step process of, first of all, listening, which I know sounds so basic, but actually this reflective listening where you just repeat back, hey, that sounds so hard. I'm so sorry you're going through that, and then repeating the feeling that they're using. Like, yeah, I understand. I hear that you feel frustrated. It makes sense that you feel that way. And use the words that they're using. It helps them feel heard. And when they feel like they have space where they have been listened to, they've been respected, their voice matters, rather than what usually happens is a parent will jump in trying to fix it for them, or kind of slap positivity on it. Oh, well, it's not that bad, or give them what they think the solution is, or how and when that happens, a teenage girl will just shut off, right? Like the slamming of the door, you don't understand me, and that's the space where no good's gonna come. I want the parent to get what they want, which is actually a connection with their child. Yep. And so it's these strategies that first, this space of genuine curiosity, no secret agenda, because they can feel it. A teenage girl can sniff out a secret agenda in 2 seconds, right? And you just truly have to release whatever that agenda is and say, I'm gonna just listen and be curious about this human being in front of me. And then the second step is phrasing everything as a question. Because when we say it as statements, they hear that as, again, instructive. Mm-hmm. And so that second step, you phrase it as everything as a question, and it's questions like, how can I support you right now? What do you need right now? What do you think the solution is? Mm. And that is when you empower them to create their own solutions. And as much as I've always had some good solutions in my head, the teenage girls are so good at coming up with their own solutions. I promise. I'm always blown away by it. And also, if they say, I don't know, which a lot of parents always tell me they say, that's okay. Like, actually create some space, hold space for this time for them to figure it out. I like to say, you know what, saying I don't know is fine. Like, I'll come back to you and say, I trust you're gonna come up with this really smart idea. I can't wait to hear what it is, right? Which empowers her to be like, oh, my parent thinks I'm really smart enough to solve this. Like, maybe I should rise to this occasion, which they do. As I know in your work, you see girls rise to the occasion all the time. And then the last step is to affirm. So even if their solution is halfway there and not all the way where you want to say, that's really smart. I hadn't thought of it that way. I'm really impressed you're thinking along those lines, because then that builds their self-trust. If you communicate to them that you trust them, then they will start trusting themselves. And that is the space of self-confidence that everyone is like, how do we make girls more confident? I'm sure you hear it all the time, right? Yeah. How do we make them more confident? Well, to me, the key is self-trust. And they must first hear that the adults in their life trust them to come up with solutions, to communicate their needs, right? That question, what do you need right now? Girls aren't asked that a lot, actually. They are, again, considered superficial, or we're not, as women, so often we're putting everyone else's needs before our own. Yep. And that forming that muscle, that mechanism for a girl at a young age to be checking in with herself and being like, wait, what do I need right now? Even if she doesn't have the answer right away, at least she's having that muscle of checking in and asking. Yeah. What have you seen in the work that you've done around this?
Well, what I love, many of the things you touched on, but I think, and especially in the title of your book, is just how underestimated teenage girls are, and that they have that wisdom, and it's often inside them. And as adults and parents and educators and teachers, we need to bring that out of them, because they have the answers. Yeah. And at Flourish, we talk a lot about coming into the space, as a parent or an educator, with this idea of being non-judgmental and curious, and empowering the young girl to have the answers. And that's everything you've just touched on. But I think also what we see in our workshops is this space of validation, that whatever you're going through is enough if you don't feel good, or it feels relative. I always say, everything's relative. I see my 2.5-year-old trip over and not even graze his knee, and he's hysterically crying for hours, because that's the most pain he's ever felt, right? So everything that these girls have been through are relative to their own situations, and just holding that validation piece of, it's okay not to be okay. Yes. And we're not necessarily jumping to fixing it, I think is such an underestimated thing, because parents just want their kids to be okay. So jumping into
it's
fixing
so hard.
mode.
Yeah, it's so hard. You're in pain watching your kid in pain.
Totally.
So you do want to fix it. And I along the same lines, right? The first chapter of the book is feelings. And I always say these feelings that are more difficult, anger, disappointment, frustration, are normal human emotions.
Yeah.
But when a parent sees a kid in that, it's like, oh, I don't want him to feel that. But that's not real life. That's the space where we build resilience and allow them to find their way through it, and not tell them that they're bad for feeling it. Because when they sense that, you squash it deep down inside of you, which is something I did as a teenager, and then it explodes out of you, in therapy many years later, right?
Yes.
No, like what if we actually, because the truth is, a difficult emotion, it passes through you when you're allowed the space to actually feel it. But when you squash it, it becomes resentment. There's so many other more toxic things that can happen.
Yeah. I also love, and I think you touched on it before, this idea of role modeling. Like, as parents and adults, we're not perfect, and showing girls, like, as you said, if you don't have the answer now, I'm still here for you and we'll work through it. And I also don't always have the answers as a parent or an educator, and that's okay. Yeah. And I love that that's what you've spoken about as well.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like, I'm always the translator for the teenage girls, or their microphone for what they want to say to the world. They care, probably, again, over and over, they're always like, oh, just my parents just cared about my feelings or listened to my feelings. And I know the parents are like, I am. Like, she's got a lot of feelings. I am, right? And no, it's just it's just such an easy trick to actually just sit there and say, I'm not going to say anything. And if I do say something, it's just quite simply the sentences of, that sounds so hard. I'm so sorry you're going through that. And, is there anything I can do to support you, or what do you need? I mean, also just sometimes actually saying, do you need space right now? Do you just want to vent and have me listen? And then if you really do want to give advice, always ask for consent. And permission. Always say, do you want my thoughts on this right now? Yeah. And with genuine sincerity, right? Like, do you want my thoughts on this? And if she says no, don't worry about it. Like, the fact that you asked, she has registered and been like, okay, she respects. Like, she'll come back when she's ready. And but oftentimes when I do ask, after I've given them a lot of space and validation, they're like, well, yeah, actually, what do you think? And then I, again, keep it not prescriptive teaching. And I'm like, well, when I went through that, I keep it personal.
Yeah. And that's the role modeling piece again of, we know that so many girls look up to you, and you're such a big mentor. And I think we see the same in our workshops with our facilitators. They become these almost beacons of light to girls, and just asking permission and role modeling that you've also been through things. And as adults, we're definitely not perfect is so essential.
Yes, indeed.
I feel like we can't get much further into this talk and not talk about social media, right? It's the question on every parent's mind, how to navigate. It's what I hear all the time in private practice in the work I do as a therapist, and we hear about it all the time at Flourish, and there's no better person to hear their opinion than you. So tell us kind of your thoughts and the best ways for parents to navigate the online world.
And please know, to the parents, that I feel for you, okay? And this is it truly is hard to navigate. And I have been an adult who actually lives and breathes with the teenagers in a social media space. Like, they all follow me. I follow all of them. Like, I'm on their Finsta accounts. Like, I actually am, I'm sitting there, like, checking out posts with them. So I really know a different angle of this, where I'm like kind of one of the girls, right? And so, as much as obviously there are really difficult, not okay things that we're all struggling with and trying to figure out how to navigate, there's also another truth, that is, social media is not going anywhere. And it is something we need to reckon with. As much as we wish we could, like, just say, oh, I don't want it ever, I am much more in the space of, okay, it's here. What do we do now to help create healthy choices? And so a lot of that has to do with integrating the girl's voice into the conversation. And I know a lot of parents feel like they've kind of tried to do that. I will say that this works best when you start young, when you kind of have your most leverage, which is when they want to get the phone.
Yeah.
That is when you can start setting up your guidelines and your relationship. And I know a lot of parents who've kind of done a test run where they see what works, what doesn't, something that really figures out what's right for your family. I would never be the person to be like, this across the board is the exact solution for every single family, okay? Yeah. That is not what I do. Because I actually have worked with such like hundreds of girls, right? That all have different relationships to social media. It's not so black and white of they're just hating themselves, looking at skinny pictures. It's not that at all. And in my experience actually is that they also have a lot of exposure to really cool concepts like mental health concepts and psychology concepts and social activism, and they're really into it. And I have teenage girls bringing up the different trauma responses to me, or a 16-year-old not long ago told me about her mother wound, and I was like, wow, I didn't know about a mother wound until many, many years later. Like, these girls are like interested in how the brain works and how they can use their voice to create positive change in the world and climate change, like things that they are learning about from social media, right? So there's this whole other side that I have girls being like, can I text you videos on TikTok that are about feminism? Because no one in my life seems to care about these videos. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, great. Then we can talk about it, right? Yeah. Girl texted me not long ago a video about shame, around body shame. And we had this wonderful discussion about it, right? So there is this whole world where it can open up really important conversations. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to underestimate that either, And so that said, in terms of helping them find healthy choices so they don't just, in the addictive nature, obviously I want to acknowledge there's an addictive nature to it. I find, again, inviting the girl into the game of understanding, because she's smart enough, don't underestimate her, right? Like explaining to her how the brain works and the addictive nature, like have her, before she gets her phone, she has to do a little presentation on it. I've had people do that where she teaches the parents how the brain works in relationship to social media, so she really understands it. And when I've had girls do that, they honestly start making healthy choices themselves. They don't need the parent yelling at them and taking away their phone all the time. And I have many girls who put their phone in a different room at night because they feel like it distracts them. Most often they just want the phone in the room because it has their alarm clock, is what I've learned. And parents don't realize that's legitimately why they want it in there, But the biggest tip I can give is these conversation tools that I've already kind of delineated, which is this: number one, listen first. If she feels like you heard what she has to say, ask her, what do you like about social media? Which accounts are you following that inspire you? Like, with curiosity, not with like, I'm over here evaluating if these are good enough accounts, or I'm so stressed out, like no secret agenda. And listen and follow the same accounts and reference them. So, and a conversation where you just listen to her perspective. That's not when you have the big talk. And then, so you can build trust that you're not judging her. That's when she becomes receptive to input or an exchange or a relationship of respect. Yeah. And then it's that phrase things as a question. And then when she is following cool accounts, affirm that and be like, I think it's really cool you took that perspective. And then at the end of the day, if it does turn into a toxic place, which is of course happening, it's making that space for the feelings, curiosity around that. Like, why do you think it played out that way? What do you need to navigate this? Do you have a solution on how to approach it? Like, again, giving her respect and agency, because that's the main difference between teenage years and youth, right? And a lot of what my book is about too is healing your own inner teenage girl, because so often a lot of our issues are coming from our own triggers, and we're kind of just projecting on to the kid our own worries and our own insecurities. And I found too, when you just kind of do your own work and then you can approach her with that genuine curiosity to really listen.
Yeah, I love that. A tip I like to talk about a lot is like almost going through a stock take of who the young girl follows, and almost sitting with genuine curiosity around like, why is this account important to you, or what does it teach you, and kind of filtering out what is positive and what isn't for the young girls on their social media. And on that vein, I want to say, like, one of my favorite Instagram accounts is yours, because I think you so balance this life of, you know, being an author and stepping into kind of the entertainment industry with the balance of also like life in my pajamas, you know, renewed my vows with my husband, deeply in love. And I love that about you. Like, I think you toe that line that so many girls should look up to, of it's not like what I call Instagram versus reality. Like, not everything we're seeing is real, but also how good are the accounts where they show both sides. So.
Yes, well, thank you. And, you know, I have so many teenage girls who follow me too, and I get to see what they like and stuff.
Totally.
And actually, they really love when I post about politics, like things, again, that their parents are underestimating, where they're like, yeah, girl, you know, like a lot of women's empowerment stuff they're so into. And this generation, Gen Z, is a girls generation, right? And now coming back to, again, that unfair judgment that society has put this narrative around mean girls, right? That's so, when people heard I was writing a book about teenage girls, everyone was like, but they're so mean. And I was like, well, first of all, that hasn't been my experience. Yeah. And second of all, the girls are so done with that storyline. Gen Z in particular is like, they amp each other up in the comments on social media. They like to celebrate each other. You know, I think past generations were dealing with more limited space at the table, right? They were kind of only hiring one woman, or there was competition for male attention, you know, by the media. They would put that in our face. But this generation has had access to way more storylines, whether it's TVs and movies that show women supporting women. It's not cool in a TV show anymore, that storyline of girls backstabbing each other. They're so tired of it, right? And so I actually think they give us so much hope. And if anything, I've been going on, you know, news shows and NBC News in the US saying like, hey, the adults need to change the narrative of girls supporting girls, women supporting women, because the girls are doing it and we need to better support it.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the biggest feedback pieces, or like positive things we get from our workshops, is just the space that the Flourish Journey creates of girls within a classroom that like thought they had one conceptualization of what was going on for another girl, just being like, wow, we're all going through the same thing. And, you know, we'd love to eradicate it, but the popularity groups or the different friendship groups, and then you sit in a room and you kind of strip that back. And I know we're going to do it on Friday, and I'm so excited. And then they have this moment of like, wow, everyone is going through the same thing as me. And I think that social media element, like I love what you said, like it's not going anywhere, so let's work with it. And I see so many positives of social media, but for me, that's also one of the really big things of people going through things and having the ability to validate that other people are going through it, and there is hope, and there is ways out, and there is ways to manage and cope.
And so on my social media, I'll share when I'm struggling about something. Like, by no means do I show a perfect show.
I love your dance
Yeah,
classes.
I dance. Like, I try to show that I'm living like a bold life, not caring what people think, which is my authenticity, right? And I'll model that so that they feel like there's no box, right? This idea, again, the other pressures that girls feel, the main pressures are feeling like they need to be perfect and they need to be likable. Yeah. And that box is so constrictive, and it makes them feel like they have to put on a show all the time. And I feel like that carries into adulthood too. Women are taught, if anything, I love teenage girls when I'm still catching them at that like just brutal, radical honesty where they just keep it real. Like, if you want to connect with a teenage girl, just give her the truth, just the bloody truth, because she will be like, oh, okay, she's being real with me. But then you start seeing this kind of all of a sudden, they get kind of socialized into like, well, I have to do the polite thing, like the good girl conditioning. I have to like fit in that box that is impossible because being perfect doesn't exist. Everybody is an imperfect human being. And so I love to create that messy space of exploration and for them to find their identity. And you made a good point a second ago I wanted to say something on too, is like they're not alone. With the mean girls, certainly like we haven't eradicated that, right? Like there's still some bullying and mean girl situations, but when I talk to Gen Z about it, it's been so different because again, they're much more familiar with mental health concepts and psychology. So I'll often ask them, you know, this girl who's being mean to you, what's her home life like? What are her parents like? And she knows. She's like, oh, the mother always criticizes her. Her dad's never home, right? And I'm like, oh, like, do you think that's hard for her? Do you think she might be in some pain? And the girl's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I bet it really sucks for her. And I'm just like, do you think she's functioning out of pain and that's why she's bullying and it has nothing to do with you? And she's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I feel bad for her. That probably is happening. And these teenage girls are brilliantly going to compassion so fast, which is why, again, I wrote a whole book about, like, what if we actually listened to their approach? The fact that they can turn to compassion so fast is something so beautiful and so brilliant and could help change the world. And those are the moments I want to highlight.
Yeah, thank you. Very powerful. I think with social media comes a pressure around beauty and image and standards. I would love to hear a bit more about what you think about that and the best way to navigate it. I mean, I think, Mecca, one of our partners, does a brilliant job at educating girls and what's happening in stores and behind the makeup and how best to, as they say, like, embolden your beauty.
Well, and also what I love about Mecca so much is that they understand that it's an identity exploration, that there's creativity involved. Yeah. Like, I used to be super anti-beauty and was just like, no, because I kind of was in that feminist generation of, like, you hide your beauty because that's what you do to be taken seriously. And I know so many parents that are so worried when they see their daughter caring about beauty that is as if it's like a done deal, that now she's superficial and now that's all she cares about. Yeah. And that's not the storyline going on with Gen Z in particular. They see it as an expression of creativity, and they get to explore who they are, and they'll try this, they'll try a little that. Same with fashion, right? And they've really taught me a lot about just me finding my own inner radiance and so on. And so their relationship to makeup actually, to me, is more evolved than I've seen in past generations. Like, past generations, we were putting on makeup to, like, attract a boy. Like, it's not like that for them. They're usually being really creative with it. And with Mecca supporting gender equality the way they do with Empower, and that's their social change part of their company, they see that as, like, when you feel your most authentic self, you are more powerful to advocate for positive change. Yeah, like, when you feel powerful, you can show up in a different way, in different rooms, in a way that uses your voice. And it's that authenticity that I am most interested in. And teenage girls are exploring it with what they look like, with their clothes. And so whenever there's any commentary on a girl's body or a girl's clothes, it really shames them as how they experience it. So as much as a parent thinks they might be protecting them with this comment, the girl will take it as shame that something is wrong and bad with her. But again, if you can approach with curiosity of, like, how do you feel when you wear that? How does it make you feel? Like, what part of yourself are you expressing today? Like, oh, I love how your outfit is showing this bold, colorful part of who you are. Yeah. Like, and really tying it to more their personality and their expression of their authenticity. That's what they love. Right? Because I have a whole chapter entitled Beauty where you can go into more depth about this. But if you actually ask, and which I do in the chapter, ask girls what is beauty, they say the most amazing things of, like, it's the energy we share together, it's the light behind your eyes. They're not like, it's the perfect blush and the perfect eyeshadow, right? Yeah. And instead, they see that as just part of the fun of it all, which I love.
Yeah, I love it. I think, like, encouraging girls and everyone to see beyond the mirror is so important, right? And for example, the other day in private practice, a parent was talking to me about how their daughter spends 2 hours a morning before school doing a makeup routine and getting ready, and how that was quite impactful on the family routine. And what we actually got to the bottom of it wasn't necessarily about how she actually looked physically in the mirror, but it was quite a, like, meditative present state of, like, grounding her before getting to school. And I think sometimes, similar to what you said, of, like, coming in with curiosity and not being judgmental and understanding, like, why is this routine important, or why is the makeup, what's happening literally behind the mirror for you, is such an important way to get on the girl's level and also understand why is beauty important.
Yeah, and I would love that so much, because again, it's yet another example of how there's so much more going on than our projections onto what we think is happening. And of course, there are toxic beauty standards
Absolutely.
of like that impact. You know, that I've had a lot of girls struggle with disordered eating and so on, and that again just takes curiosity of where that came from. And I'm going to get really real right now, because as much as parents are worrying about the social media beauty standards, the things girls have told me most is what other women in their lives say about their own body in front of them. That women, their moms often insult their own body, insult their own looks, are always on a diet. And the girls are like, well, basically my mom has normalized being on a diet my whole life. That's just what's normal, to hate your body. And when you kind of reckon with it for a second, you're like, oh my gosh, we are collectively teaching girls to often hate their body and their looks. And so we can't control the beauty standards, you know, like what the social media is putting out there, that's out of our control. But what is in our control is how we speak about our own body, our own looks in front of girls, and how we speak about theirs. Because when we make even subtle comments, honestly, even compliments are usually taken wrong, like compliments about body image, because they're like, oh, you look so thin. Oh, well, was I not thin before? You know, like I just say, don't comment on their body. Like, girls never want people to comment on the body. So that's a huge one in general, to make sure, and that we can collectively as women model a new way and break the cycle of how women talk about their bodies and beauty in front of girls.
I love that. That resonates with me so much, because I mean, you can't see because I'm on a couch, but I'm over 6 foot tall, and my whole life my mum spoke to me about being tall and that I needed to meet a guy taller than me, and it all came from a good place. But for so long in my teenage years, you would shrink down in every photo, and I think even today in a photo with you, I caught myself shrinking down. I was like, no, I have to own this tallness. But that idea of like people compliment things, and even today people comment on how tall I'm at, and I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, we carry it through with us, don't we?
Oh my gosh, yeah. But that's again like on my Instagram or my life now. Like, I'll have my hair like I always say, I like when my hair's messy. I like when I like wearing bright colors, and I just own it instead. You know, whatever the thing we thought is bad about it, when you own it, there's actually an authenticity that comes through that really creates beauty, and that's what I love discussing with teenage girls.
Yeah, I love it. Let's talk about perfectionism. You touched on it before, and I think it's something we see so much. I feel like I talk about it 24/7 in private practice. We see it in our workshops. It's really everywhere. How do you manage that with the girls you work with, and what's your advice in approaching it for parents?
And this pressure to be perfect. I have a whole chapter perfection, a whole chapter people pleasing, and it's just a weight on their shoulders. I know everyone's worried about girls' anxiety that they have right now, and again, they're blaming social media, which sure can have a factor. But what I see and what I hear from the girls most is honestly the pressure around being perfect and having perfect grades, getting into a university, just, you know, all
ticking all the boxes.
And that be a sign of their worth. Like, if they just do enough, if they're just perfect enough, then they'll have worth in the world. And then, you know, unconsciously playing out this story. And I have a good example I know I've shared before with you is a girl, 15-year-old Marley, who was incredible volleyball player, expert volleyball player, and, you know, on the top varsity team as a freshman, and I got so affirmed for it. But she had migraines and stomach problems, and I noticed, you know, it was corresponding with volleyball games, and I was like, you know, do you like playing volleyball? I just decided to ask her one day, and she was like, no one had ever asked her that question, right? And she was like, I like that I'm good at it, right? Because that's what she was
That
told.
was her worth.
Yeah, if you're good at it, you better do it a lot. And the real truth is, girls and women can be good at lots of things. It does not mean you have to devote your life to it. And then I realized she was doing it for her mom too. And I asked, you know, are you playing volleyball to please everyone around you? And she was just like, oh no, you're right. And so incorporating her mom into the conversation and me asking, like, what actually lights you up? What gives you joy? Turns out she would do fashion sketches in the car rides, and it just brought her so much joy. And we got her into some sewing classes, and she became amazing at it, and she ended up quitting volleyball, even though she was literally the star player that was going to play on a university level, right? But she became incredible with fashion design. And to this day, right now, she actually works for Skims, like a huge fashion company. And, you know, parents are often like, that's another superficial thing they just shoo away. It's like, oh, fashion, girls love fashion. But the truth is there's lots of jobs in the fashion industry, and there's not many professional volleyball players. And I always think that's funny, those types of pressures. But if we just, the beauty was with Marley is also her migraines went away, her stomach problems went away because she was doing something that actually brought her joy rather than this perfection weight on her of performing something that wasn't actually tied to her authenticity. And that is what I see play out over and over and over again. And I know parents are scared, like, oh my gosh, they're good at this. This is their way to success. And what I have seen is often they go at it for like 5 years and then, or they end up transferring universities, like they end up falling apart at some point and being like, no, this is not actually what I love at all. And if you can just start earlier, finding what lights them up and where their natural talent exists, they will be successful. And it may not look the way you think it's gonna look. I mean, my life has played out in unimaginable ways. By no means I ever guessed was gonna play out this way. And you have to let it unfold, and you have to let them be a part of that unfolding, to have agency in it, because if they have agency, then they will execute something fully empowered and beautiful and bold in their life.
Yeah, I love that. I think also, you know, it's obvious to us as adults, but at the end of the day, perfectionism does not exist, right? What we know is somebody striving for perfectionism will keep moving the yardstick because you can't actually tick the box and you'll never feel satisfied. And I think similar to Marley's story, like encouraging young girls to practice something that they're not good at and sit in how that feels and just enjoying it for what it is, as opposed to striving towards being incredible at something and never meeting that, is so important.
I had a girl write her college essay on how one of her favorite things to do is to do things she's bad at. And it was so incredible of like, just, she does it for just the pure joy of it. And it was this really sassy essay, and she totally got into her top colleges and whatever, but because it was so authentic too, of her just, oh, you know, if you had told someone, yeah, an essay on doing things badly would do well. Again, it's just like, actually go with your natural instincts of what lights you up.
Yeah. I think also something that's often, I'll go off the theme of underestimated based on the title of your book, is, and you touched on it before, is like the connection between brain and body. And obviously a lot of the time teenagers are not yet tuned into that, but things like headaches, bad sleep, you know, what we call anhedonia, which is no longer doing things that you enjoy doing, can be signs of mental health and difficulties and struggles. And I think a lot of the time parents will ask, like, how do I know that my daughter's going through something? And I was speaking to a parent a while ago who found their daughter like vomiting in the bathroom before an exam, right? And he said to me, like, how could I have known when she was at a 1, not a 10? Like, I don't want her to feel that pressure around exams. Like, it doesn't mean that much to me. And I think sometimes tuning into what can be happening in the person's body, and the same as us as adults, like how often does poor sleep indicate that like maybe you're stressed about something, or maybe there's something going on at home. And I guess that's a piece of advice on my end of just like tuning into what differences are you noticing in your young person that might be indicating that there's something else going on.
There's so many parents that, you know, when migraines are so popular with teenage girls, and it's like they either kind of just power through it, or they're certain it's like an actual medical problem.
Or period related.
Yeah, or blaming that, right? I also, like, again, kind of love to give permission to that gray zone where things aren't so black and white. Like, it's either perfect or it's a failure. Yeah. And saying, you know, what if you did get a C on that essay? You know, you don't have anything to prove to me. Like, I know you're brilliant. And the girls are often like, wait, really? Like, you would still think I'm brilliant if I get a C on this? And I'm like, yes. And that sentence, like, you have nothing to prove to me. You have inherent worth and value. I think it's so important to always say that out loud, because they are unconsciously hustling for worth and attention much more than we think they are. And that's that kind of catching it earlier, where we give permission to that growth space. It's a space of learning and growth.
Yeah. And I think that idea of growth space ties in so nicely to this idea of like an inner critic, right? And we all have it. We all have those voices inside us that, you know, are on the shoulder telling us to do certain things or talking down to ourselves. And I know you speak a lot and have a lot of experience in how to challenge that, both for the girl and the parent. So I'd love you to talk a bit to that.
Right, and I talk a lot about in the self-doubt chapter about like a girl even becoming aware of that mean voice inside of her head. I often call it the mean voice. You know, I use the word inner critic. There's a lot of different things out in the psychology space that calls it different things. But oftentimes a girl's like, wait, what? We all have this mean voice in our head? No one's even told them that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, we all do. And I'm like, tell me about it. What is it saying to you? And they often say, oh, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you know, you're not, all the classics that adults feel too. And just by her even exposing it and sharing it and me being like, yeah, you're not alone, is just a beautiful thing, first off. And then second, I like for them to start distancing themselves from it. And I ask, whose voice is it? And sometimes they'll say, you know, teachers or parents, but oftentimes they say societies, which is interesting, the societal messaging in general, that I genuinely believe teenage years is the time where they face the judgment of the world, right? That's why healing your inner child is different than your inner teenager, because it's just a different adolescent stage where you confront society and who you are and who you should be and how you should act and what you should look like. And so that mean voice starts kind of sounding like society's voice. And so when I say, oh, okay, so it's society's voice, it's not your voice, right? And it's not your authentic voice. And then I start saying, you know what? You can do a few strategies, but we can give it a name. You can give the mean voice a name, something that helps detach, you know, funny things help, like call it Muffy, you know, like, oh, Muffy's just being annoying again, you know, or something like that. I kind of physically shoo it away sometimes, some type of practice so they can become aware of when it happens and then actively choose their authentic voice. So I know this sounds like a lot of coaching, like a parent might be like, oh, she wouldn't even listen to me. But again, kind of share from a personal perspective of how you deal with an inner critic and say, oh, I've been dealing lately with that mean voice in our head and it's been telling me this, but I've been dealing with it this way. And just actually share your own experience without even trying to influence her. And they might be sitting there being like, oh, wait, my mom has an inner critic too, you know? Yeah. And then I love asking them, again, this authentic voice, to name what it feels like when you hear it. And so a lot of the words that they've used is their inner wisdom, their higher truth, my gut, you know, my higher self, my truth, right? Like teenage girls are good at connecting to the truth. I have a radical honesty chapter too, and I think the more we keep them really connected to the truth, the better, because then they don't put on that mask and put on the show, and that disconnection I see is where the problems happen. And so then when they start naming what that feels like, their intuition, they love that one too. I have them sit and feel what it is, so that in those moments, the inner critic comes in and can say, okay, no, and how do I access my intuition? And the girls love doing this. They kind of, again, love this psychology approach and understanding how their brain works, and we're underestimating their ability to do this and get involved in it. I mean, heck, there's TikTok videos they could watch on it. Again, I know I'm bringing in social media, but like, I don't know, there's some really good ones that explain it and help them, and they want to share them, show it. They're like, oh, Chelsey, we talked about this. Let me show you this video. And I'm like, oh, that's a great teaching tool. Yeah. You know, so when they know that I'm not gonna just take away their phone and I'm actually gonna just like listen and respect what they have to say, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Something I love that you touched on is this idea for parents of role modeling vulnerability. And I think so often we hear from teenage girls that they haven't felt able to open up to an adult or a trusted person or a teacher or an educator because they didn't realize that as adults we have that inner critic. We've been through that, you know, that problem that they're experiencing that feels like their entire world in that moment is not something that they're alone in. And I think that the idea of parents role modeling that they too have an inner critic and not just giving the skills to challenge it is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, it's showing our humanity. And when we show vulnerability in our humanity, that's where you actually honestly connect. And it creates emotional and psychological safety. And what that space is, when they feel emotional, psychological safety, it's that feeling that you can speak up and you can be exactly who you are, and you're not gonna be shut down for it in any way, because all parts of you are welcome and no part of you is bad, right? And I know, again, that parents aren't trying to communicate that, and it happens subtly. It happens through the constant correction, the constant teaching, the constant, like, they tell you a good thing, and then you're immediately thinking, oh, well, they could have done it this way, and you kind of say that, and you miss the moment to just affirm, and be like, wow, that was really smart. I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Because those are the moments the girls just like, that they light up. And I have started a practice, and I have a compliments chapter of increase your compliments to 3 sentences. Do it with your friends too. If you text a compliment that's 3 sentences long to a friend, they are never gonna forget it, right? They feel so seen and celebrated. And what happens is you want to be that person more, right? Like when a teenage girl, I give her a long compliment about, like, oh my gosh, I see how you juggle your after school schedule, and then you have to go to your divorced parents' house and take care of your sibling and make sure you're fed while you take care of doing your advanced classes, homework, girl, that is a lot you're juggling, wow. And she just is like, wow, no one ever says that to me, thank you. And because what she hears is like, you're amazing, right? And it's just kind of a real general compliment. Or oftentimes we think those high functioning girls hear compliments a lot, but they're hearing, wow, you're amazing. That's
just smart.
Yeah, you're so smart. And not like compliments that help them feel seen, all the little tiny hard work things they're doing along the way and juggling. And that is where the magic happens.
Yeah, and I love that. Again, so much alignment in what you do and what we talk about at Flourish. But at the end of all our workshops, we do what we call an honoring or a shout out. And we really encourage girls, like, not to say like superficial things like, you're so pretty or you're so smart, but like to go beyond those, superficial one-liner compliments. And what we see is not just like the best friend complimenting the best friend, but through the workshop and through being able to get deeper and establish that validation, and that there's a common experience going on, that like, oh wow, like what you said, like I love that, you've got so much going on at home, but you still show up to school and give it your all, and it's amazing. You just see these shifts in the room of like, okay, like we've got this.
Yeah.
It's a unity.
And it's also a great trick. Everyone wants people to like them, but people like you. Oh, actually, the parents want their daughter to like them, right? Like lots of times parents are like, how do I get my teenage daughter to like me?
Absolutely.
She will like you as much as she likes herself through your eyes. So if you're just constantly critiquing, that's how she's going to perceive herself around you. But when that space of affirmation, she's gonna grow more into that good energy. What you give attention to grows. And so it's that idea of that positive affirmation growing the parts of her personality, but then also she'll just feel safer with you because she feels celebrated and loved in that space. So it's really, as a parent, bringing a conscious element to like, how much am I doing this? Because you think, again, you're kind of complimenting, but again, it often has to do with looks or one quick sentence of, you're amazing, or it's always about good grades. Like, look for also the qualities. I always say look for their weirdness, something that maybe might make them feel insecure, but instead say, oh, like I told a girl the other day, that I love how she always knows the latest slang words and knows how to incorporate them flawlessly into a conversation, right? And she was just like, I do that. Yeah, cool, and it's not like about her grades or something, but she just felt cool about it, right?
Yeah.
And there's something about that again helps her step into her confidence and exploration of her identity and who she is. Like, that's what we're aiming for here.
Yeah, I love that. I also think what I love to talk about a lot in the psychology space is this idea that we're all our own harshest critiques, and like that's such a fact, and that we're so much harsher to ourselves than we are our friends or our loved ones. And often when I hear that coming up in a Flourish world and in a psychology, like kind of private work world, I'll turn to the person and just say like, what would you say to your friend in that situation? And they'll straight away be able to give themselves, but with their friend in mind, such better advice, or being so much less harsh. And I think that's a really good skill to encourage in young people, of when you hear that harsh inner critique being vocalized, of like, what would you say if you heard someone else you cared about talking about that?
Exactly. Well, wait, how much time do we have? Because I wanted to mention something else
10 minutes.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Because in the power chapter, it's last chapter, I like to bring it up because so often we're giving these kind of like parenting techniques, right, that are throughout, and I know was a big part of tonight's framing. But I also want to bring up how we're underestimating these girls' ability to come up with not only better solutions for themselves, but for the world, okay? Like when I ask them ideas on big, broad, sweeping issues, they always approach it with care, empathy, generosity, community. And so when I ask them, do you want to be powerful? So often they had associated that word with like the historical nature of dominance and oppression and seeking status and wealth and physical power, right? Something that they don't feel is them, or that, first of all, doesn't include them, but also that they don't even want to be a part of. And so because of that, they're kind of like, power is not, they feel even weird wanting it. Like I had girls tell me that. And instead, I would love to reframe this conversation of how empathy is powerful, right? Generosity, community, this is what's powerful. And you'll see the girls quoted in the book talk about that. What they see is, I'd ask them, what would you imagine a world of like the majority of female leaders, right? And that's pretty oversimplified, but it was wild to hear their responses of like, there would be peace, there would be communication, there would be caring for people. Like that's what they feel like feminine leadership is and how they want to lead. And we should be listening to that and learning from it. And they have a better plan than what we're doing currently, right? Yeah. And so it starts young though. If we're not listening, if we're just dismissing and minimizing them at this young age as mean girls or too emotional, too loud, too talkative, oh my gosh, the things I hear, right? That's when it starts. That's when we silence them. And that's what I'm here to stop, because I think we are ready for a new type of leadership that involves these girls' voices, and it needs to start though in their teenage years so that they are ready to step into their full power into adulthood, and that they, I got called bossy at a young age, and it was such a negative box to it, and that it kind of silenced me for a long time, right? And now when I reframed it as actually I had natural leadership abilities is actually what it meant. And then I stepped into that, reclaiming that word for myself, right? Look at where I am now, right? I'm traveling the world and empowering women and girls to step into their voice, their power. But what if I had done that earlier in my life? What if I hadn't been kind of squashed by certain limiting words? And so that's why it matters that we start now. That's why that's why I have focused on this age too, that I believe not only can we have more connection and understanding with our kids, but we can also change the world by investing in these girls.
Yeah, I love that. I think the labels thing is so big for teenage girls, and the words that they get called and they call themselves. And yeah, we actually, again, so much common ground here, but spend a lot of time in our workshops challenging the labels and things like bossy or bitchy and things that like are really common to label teenage girls, and how you can flip them into the positivity of, as you said, stepping into your leadership, your empowerment. Everything that you've come to today is just massive and a big thing that we should be encouraging with girls.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I also then hear a lot of parents be like, oh, well, she's empowered enough. Like, oh, I promise you she's empowered, right? Because Gen Z is better at this. And they are kind of like not taking no for an answer. And it's throwing people a little bit. Like dads are a little bit like, oh, my daughter's like really strong. Is this a bad thing? And I had an amazing father, and you can hear stories about him, who really just met me in my full power and didn't underestimate me, right? And I really believe the dad's investment too of saying to her, because so often a dad kind of represents the system of power in the world unconsciously, and when he says you can do anything, it really impacts a girl positively, just on an unconscious level. And so I encourage dads, first of all, I think your role in a daughter's life is so critical and important. And I encourage you to not be afraid of your daughter's power in any way, shape, or form, to not kind of even make a joke about it, to like own it and be like, yeah, my daughter is powerful. And that's it. Don't make it like, oh, she's really a lot these days. No, you know what? Like, be grateful that she is in that moment and encourage it as much as you can.
Yeah. Sounds like we both had common experiences of incredibly inspiring dads.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky with both my parents and the way they encouraged me to step up rather than be shut down. So, yeah. I think we have a few last minute kind of thank yous and things to mention. And of course, we need to plug your incredible book. I just want to say that if you haven't read Chelsey's book, you're missing out. And I believe the chat function isn't working, so we haven't been able to send the link, but it is in the bio. And after tonight, everyone will be getting an email with a special discount, thanks to Chelsey's publisher, to get the book. It lives next to my bedside, and I have lent it out to a lot of my clients who rave about it, so I couldn't plug it more.
Thank you.
But Chelsey, just before we get to that, you touched on it before. As part of my work at Flourish, I also host a podcast, and I always end my podcast, and I know tonight is not a podcast, but with my favorite question. So I want to ask you if you could give teenage Chelsey one piece of advice with the hindsight of what you've been through and the amazing career you have built, what would it be?
I would tell her that nothing externally and outside of her determines her worth. That you decide that for yourself, that you have the agency to choose your life and how you're going to live it, and that no commentary, no judgment, no measure of or evaluation of you being good enough is what you should be seeking, and to seek from within, and then that will guide you to the most meaningful life you can imagine.
On behalf of the Flourish Journey, I just want to thank you so much for joining us. You know, the first time we met on Zoom, I was like, whoa, I've never met someone whose vibrance goes beyond a computer screen. And I think you just bring that everywhere you go, and it's so incredible. And I've loved spending the last few days with you and look forward to the next few.
Truthfully, the Flourish Journey, meeting you all and realizing the work you're doing in Australia, you are the leaders in the teenage girl movement across Australia. And as soon as I learned about your work, I was like, I'm all in. How can I support you? Because it's rare to see such alignment of understanding them the way that you do. And so I couldn't recommend all girls getting involved. And then also you introduced me to Mecca and Mecca Empower, and like being able to see a brand actually put their money where their mouth is, and you know, brands talk all the time about gender equality. They actually show up day in, day out and say, how can we empower girls into more confidence, into more authenticity? And that has been really meaningful and inspiring for me to collaborate with all of you to build something bigger and better for a better future.
Thank you. And yeah, an extra big shout out to Mecca and Mecca Empower. Couldn't have done tonight, Chelsey's trip, and we have a big workshop on Friday that we're super excited about without them.
And get the book, because I can't wait to hear your thoughts. You can follow me on Instagram and then DM me your thoughts on the book, because I can't wait to hear it. And we got you all a special discount that only lasts 1 week too. So.
And I think tonight we've touched on so many topics, and I have no doubt that everyone kind of probably wanted to ask questions, and you and I could have spent an hour on each chapter of the book. So definitely couldn't plug it more to deep dive into how to help your teenager. Thank you so much, Chelsey.
Thank you.